Good morning, Jan John here. A few days ago I happened to notice a tourist trying to use chopsticks to eat some fried noodles. She was really struggling because clearly she had not used chopsticks before, and it made me wonder why she hadn't chosen a fork. Normally the street vendors who sell fried noodles will also provide forks as well as chopsticks. So why hadn't the tourist just chosen a fork rather than the more difficult to use chopsticks? It made me recall the first time I used chopsticks when I was maybe around 22. I went to a Chinese restaurant with some Asian friends in London while I was at university, and they challenged me to try to use chopsticks. I remember looking at these two long pieces of wood, or they may have been plastic, and thinking, my God, what a clumsy implement to use to eat your food with. Implement, I-M-P-L-E-M-E-N-T. Nevertheless, I rose to the challenge, and so began my life of using chopsticks. Now I am extremely expert with chopsticks and can even pick up a grain of rice. So I guess the tourist felt quite similar to the way I had all those many years ago. The sense of adventure and excitement at some new challenge. Chopsticks do require a great deal of dexterity, D-E-X-T-E-R-I-T-Y, to use. It must be very similar to learning to write with a pen or pencil for the first time. Very delicate movements of the hands and fingers are required. When I first started using chopsticks, I used to try to use them for almost every kind of food. Rice, noodles, whatever. But later I questioned my use of them and decided that for things like rice, for example, it was much easier and more practical to use a spoon. And a fork is sometimes the better tool for the job, depending on the food which you are eating. In fact, I probably would say after many years of using chopsticks that it's probably better to use a spoon or a fork on most occasions. Yet where I live in Bangkok, it's certainly not unusual to see people using chopsticks, even though objectively they are probably not the most convenient implements to use for most kinds of food. So is this a case of cultural obstinacy? Cultural, C-L-U-T-U-R-A-L, obstinacy, O-B-S-T-I-N-A-C-Y, meaning a resistance to change old habits. I suspect it probably is. If the Chinese have been using chopsticks for thousands of years, it's going to be quite a difficult habit to change, and people may associate some cultural value to their use. But if you are an open-minded person and constantly looking for better ways of doing things, you might decide for yourself that chopsticks are mostly not the best tool for the job. So let's do an essay question. The question is, should we try new things in life, or should we stick to what we know to be effective or satisfying? So first paragraph. The process of life is in many ways a process of learning. From the time we are very young until the day we die, we are constantly learning and adapting our behavior. We are usually trying to find the best way to do things, and once we have discovered it, we will stick with that method. For example, the first time you wash your face when you are a kid, you might get soap in your eyes, and the stinging sensation, the painful stinging sensation, will soon teach you to keep your eyes closed when you are washing your face. That's not a lesson you need to learn many times, and once learned, it will forever change the way you wash your face. And we don't need to try a new method. Second paragraph, I'm going to support not trying new things. Through this lifelong learning process, we learn to avoid pain and have more pleasure and comfort. And these many millions of things we learn lead us to having a better life. Sometimes we cannot remember the things we have learned, we just do them as a matter of habit, but they do protect us from unpleasant situations. The way we dress, eat our food, what streets we walk on at night, what restaurants we like to eat in, what activities we prefer in our free time. All of these are the results of a trial and error learning process over thousands and thousands of incidents, and once we have chosen, we tend not to change. We don't mostly want to try new things because it is too risky. I have a friend, for example, who started playing squash in his 50s. He had never played squash before, but was feeling fit and strong, so he thought it would be a good way to spend a few hours each week. He had only been playing squash for 3 or 4 weeks when he started to get severe pains in his knees, and he quickly realized that this energetic game was too strenuous and dangerous for a man of his age who had never played this game before. Unfortunately, the damage to his knees was very severe and he had to have several operations. So that new venture of playing a new sport at an advanced age was clearly a mistake. Third paragraph, supporting why we might try new things. On the other hand, it can be fun and exciting to occasionally try something new. Visiting a new restaurant and trying a new cuisine, trying a new cuisine, cuisine, going on holiday to a different destination, making new friends. All of these things can be exciting and may sometimes lead to new, interesting and useful discoveries. Our lives can always get into a rut, R-U-T, and the resulting boredom is something we should probably try to change. For example, many years ago I decided to stop driving a car. I was living in London at the time and didn't really need a car, even though I had used a car for most of my adult life. So one day I decided I would try using the buses, and this opened up a whole new area of experience. I did more walking, met more people who I started chatting with at bus stops, and found the experience of sitting on a bus much more relaxing than the stress of being a driver. Since then I have rarely used a car and would recommend to everyone to try using public transport more. However, I'm not suggesting to everyone that they throw away their cars onto the scrap heap and start walking and taking buses. Final paragraph and conclusion. In conclusion, I think we should not be hasty in throwing away habits of behavior, because we have learned them over many years and they will mostly protect us from risky and dangerous situations. However, sometimes careful exploration of new areas can be appropriate. That is the end of the essay. So do you ask yourself each day, am I doing the same old things and should I be trying something new? Do you just want your life to be comfortable and the same, or are you an adventurer, an explorer? I think when people are younger, they're more adventurous and more daring, which seems appropriate because they're still at the lower part of the learning curve, so they're yet to decide their route in life. But as people get older, they have tried so much and rejected so much that there is not so much to discover anymore. But that doesn't mean we should be complacent. We should take a good look at ourselves in the mirror every morning and ask ourselves, am I becoming a boring old fart? Boring old fart, F-A-R-T. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.